Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Observable Flutter. My name is Craig LeBenz. I'm your host, as always. And today we are going to look at some code together and try to learn some good patterns, maybe reflect on some mistakes we've all made. And one of the things I talk about often at the top of this show is the importance of respect in the Flutter community and treating each other with deep respect. There's some folks who have submitted some of their code to be looked at today. And, from one perspective, you could say that was brave of them. But I'd really like to see the Flutter community make that not actually require a lot of bravery. So whatever we see in code review, remember the author is probably in the chat watching. So let's do the Flutter community proud. Let's live up to our good reputation and just be kind and respectful to each other. So with that, I think we are ready to go. And I'm actually going to start with some of my old code so that the first criticism that I levy just goes right to myself. So let's do it. I'm going to switch to a tab in just a second here. Also, if you can hear some heavy breathing, that would be my very needy husky who is upset this morning. All right. So I'm going to go to GitHub here. And I'll switch to my desktop. All right. So the first package that I'm going to look at is one from myself that I wrote a long time ago, and I've not looked at I've basically not looked at since null safety. So I don't really know what's in here, and we're just going to find out together. I looked at it last night only to make sure that I wasn't about to embarrass myself with 1,000 open issues I hadn't looked at. And thankfully, there were only 2, and I've responded to both of them. So this is a package that I wrote way pre-null safety, and then I updated it for null safety. And it's just called the rolling navbar. And there's some screenshots down here that show what it does. Don't pay too much attention to the stuff up top. That's maybe honestly looking back on it, just a little distracting. It's the bottom nav bar here. And the GIF kind of has a low frame rate. But the idea is this little wheel kind of rolls from spot to spot and maybe changes colors as it goes, and just kind of is whimsical is the goal. And there's different behaviors that it can do. So this is the rolling behavior where the package gets its namesake. And this is like I think it just, shrink in, out in. Yeah, so this is just kind of going. Then there's another one that I think like spin out in. And the frame rate on the GIF is just not really high enough to capture it. But, and then lastly, I think there's a snap behavior. Yeah. So this is an old package and it may or may not be any good, but I think we could probably spend a few minutes, picking it apart a little bit, and we'll learn something. So I'm going to git clone this to start. I don't even have it on this work machine. That's how old this is. I'm just going to clone it right into this directory for now, and I'll move it later. All right, code, Flutter, rolling navbar. May the force be with us, folks. Yeah, what a wonderful. So it opened this in the wrong window and with this aspect ratio. Good job. Really nicely done. Yeah, sure, please. Pub get. If pub even still has these ancient. Oh, goodness. Right, the Dart SDK. It's not even I really do have to update this because Dart 3 is out, and I, in my pubspec.yaml file, I'm saying less than 3. So I'll just make this say less than 4 for now, because the soundness of null safety isn't going to upset us. Terminal Dart pub get. I don't actually really need, I probably don't even need to do this. We're just going to code review. We're not going to run it, whatnot. Yeah, dependencies. Okay, none of this matters. All right, let's dive in to the code. I'm going to make my code area bigger and hide some other things. And let's do it. Kabin just says Mac OS and its window management. It is a little bad, isn't it? It's not the best. Shrinath is saying there's poor stream quality. Is the stream good for everybody else? Hopefully, Shrinath, I don't want to root against your internet connection, but it might just be that. All right. So into the lib directory we go. And the first thing we can see is, I wrote this. There's a convention of having like just one file with the same name as the directory, and that exports things that go into the source directory, and that's where the real goods are. I obviously didn't know about any of that. So I just put literally everything in one file. And what is the best way for me to completely disable linting? Because I don't want that at all. How would I do that? I think if I move this file somewhere else, that might work. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to close everything. And then I'm just going to say code, or we're going to, we'll make a new file, and it'll just be rolling navbar.dart. And then we'll just open that file, paste all of this in. The editor, the analysis engine is still doing it. I thought we would have to be in the folder with a pubspec.yaml file. I was wrong. Oh, well. Also, oh no, that's right. I have my null safety stuff is in a different branch. I knew I needed to do this right. All right, we're just going to actually code review in GitHub because this is not helping us out. Okay, lib, rolling navbar, but make it bigger. Maybe even another click or two. Randall says, I don't need less than 4 in the pub spec. There's a patch to 3 to permit less than 3 to also mean less than 4. What? I guess this is just so every package in the world doesn't need to be updated, which I suppose is fine, but then that's awkward. But a helpful tip, Randall. Thank you. Okay, so let's look at the top level API. Actually, let's look at the example, because this will show how it's supposed to be used. So in my package, I have an example folder, which is convention. And then in here, there's an actual just a Flutter app that uses this. And we can see I set up some dummy data here, some icons, set up some colors, and I don't know, badge widgets. Okay, I'm translating this into translating. Oh, here we go. This is the badge information. That's right. And we're translating that into a couple widgets here. Blah, 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 blah. All right. So we've got a builder doing something, a scaffold. Also, this, I don't even remember. I think this does go into the bottom nav slot on a stack, or no, sorry, not on a stack, on a scaffold, but I'm not seeing it right now because here we have the body. Oh, here we go. Bottom navbar, container, and then we finally get, so here I'm just kind of setting some sizing details, I guess, and then we can finally see how this package is supposed to be used. So the main things here in the rolling navbar .icon data constructor. Oh, and I can see here I said this one was recommended, and then there's another more complicated one, but there if you need it, where you build each of the, let's say you have 5 things on the bottom. Also, I would just already say, I don't think I have very good documentation here at all. I wrote this and I'm still struggling to remember how to use this darn thing. So first demerit for me, not good documentation. But there's badges. Oh yeah, so this would say, let's go back here. We'll look at this sample again. I wired it up with the badges package, which is a great package. So if you supply some information, it'll just put icons down here. And of course, this is behavior that folks, that is common in apps. So any bottom navbar package would need to be able to support just kind of something like this. So here, the badge widgets indicate which of these tabs have kind of unread notifications. Icon data, I think we set that up top here. And let me look for icon data. Oh, these are just literally the icons. Okay. So we're passing that in. Icon colors, that's fine. Icon text, I think that's just a list of strings. Indicator colors, probably also just basically a list of strings. And we have on animate and on tap. I think that was for driving the animation. So active index, pretty expected there. So we kind of just see there's not a ton crazy here. So actually this constructor kind of, I think, looks pretty normal. When I say driving the animation, this is like completely extra credit. If you want to be able to tap somewhere else in your app and instruct the bottom nav bar to like move to index 3 or something, for example, then you would use these. You'd need to wire up these things as well, along with then changing the active index. So, okay. Let's go back to the actual code and, oh yeah, I'm in the example. That's what's going on. And let's look at how it works for a little bit, and then we'll look at other people's code. What am I doing here? I'm at the root. So we're going into lib and rolling navbar, and let's do it. All right, so let's look at that constructor that I had. There was the so I said builder. That was the more complicated one, but there if you need it. Again, huge demerit, no docstring on the constructor itself. This is very old code. Also, I am on my null safety branch, but I don't think I did. Oh no, required is what you write. Sorry, I just saw the required decorator a second ago and got confused. Yeah, no, this is normal. But yeah, I mean, the documentation here is really lacking, even though you kind of scroll around and it's like, well, I don't know, it looks like there's dog strings for a lot of things. I mean, gosh, the constructor is the absolute most important one. So this builder constructor doesn't have an example, doesn't have a usage, doesn't have anything. So not very good. And set some stuff, make some checks. And then here's the icon data one. Again, no docstring, not very good. Sets all the things and makes a bunch more checks because this is not using the builder. So it needs to actually make sure that what you pass makes sense. And then finally in our build method, so are we a stateless widget here? We must be. I don't know why I'm checking. Yeah, because if we were in a stateful widget, we would have seen create state and not build. So we just have a layout builder and it immediately defers to something else. So the rolling nav bar inner, which is obviously private, gets a lot of parameters. And let's look at that. The animation code in here is really kind of what I wanted to peek at. All right, all these same parameters, kind of don't really need to fully study them. They get passed in. One thing I remember settling on in pre-null safety was really liking required parameters. Instead of just having something implicitly be null by having it be an optional parameter, I'd make it required and then pass null if that was the case. Obviously, that's way more common nowadays in null safety, but before I switched to the correct branch, this still said required but with the @ sign because it was the decorator on all these parameters. I always think that was a good idea. All right, now we get into the state object. Also here, it's private, so it doesn't really matter, but you know, this kind of isn't the convention for what we'd return here. We'd return instead this definition. It would be the return part of our function signature. Okay, now I think we're going to get into some really uncommented code, which is real stinky. So first thing that's jumping out at me in init state, I'm persisting the initial variables from the widget. And sometimes you need to do this if you want to remember the initial variables and compare them to what you had before. Or no, I guess, no, I'm just setting, no, this actually is the correct thing. Sorry, I had this backwards. No, I do need to actually set these here. So yeah, widget active index. So these are our this is our initial state on the stateful widget. Now what is, oh, look here. This one I am actually just saying this is a copy. I save widget.activeIndex twice for widget active index as if I couldn't just go back and look at this variable. So again here, maybe I was saying, well, widget is going to change. This is going to change. I want to know what the first one was. That would be a really valuable information to have written in a comment. I have no idea why I have this line. We'd really have to reverse why I wrote this. Let this be a lesson to everybody who thinks, I know what I'm writing. I don't need to comment this. Yes, you do. The person who you're saving might just be yourself in the future. Okay, moving on. So we also set up initialize animation update and initialize animation info. Well, this animation info thing, that was kind of nice. I got that from someone else's stuff on some like old UI challenge, right, 3 or 4 years ago on YouTube. Super valuable. So we'll get to that in a minute. But first, initialize animation update. Oh, Randall, yeah, find all references is your friend. Can we do that on GitHub? Let's find, I mean, I know there is like some kind of IntelliSense on here, but I don't really know how to hook into it. Yeah, I'm not sure how to do this. I do think they have some stuff like that, but I'm just right clicking on stuff like a dum-dum. But yeah, certainly just in the ID. Okay. They have some things like that on GitHub though, which is super impressive. But anyway. Okay, so initialize animation update. We're calling this in its state. So this happens just once and we are, okay, so I think again here, gosh, I need comments so badly. Animation update, I think, is the last update from the animation. So it's like the last tick of basically the whole state of the bottom bar. And so we're initializing this here. This animation update class does a lot of heavy lifting. So it says, what direction is the thing rolling? Right now it's stationary because this is the beginning. The percent, how far through the animation are we? This was really nice because it allows, let's say you click on 5 and so it's got all the way across your app to roll and it gets halfway there and the user says, I didn't mean to do that. And they click on 1 again. This animation update, keeping track of how far it had rolled, would allow it to just roll back from its current progress, as opposed to like glitching to 5 and then rolling back, so kind of nice behavior there that this animation update class allowed me to encapsulate. But yeah, get active color. All right, because it would change colors as it rolls. And then the rotation, of course, this is pretty valuable if it's like a spinning variant of the animation. Initialize animation info. Oh, Lordy. What is the difference between these? Some different variables, some are the same. Good job. Really, really good. Really good. I have no idea. I don't have a clue what that was. I remember when I did this. Calculate sides per list item. I was just like, I bet there'll always be 3 to 5 slots in the bottom thing. And this was calculate sides per list item is like, are they hexagons? Are they octagons? Are they squares? I think. Actually, I'm not sure. I think they were always hexagons. It must have been something else. Again, We need a comment here. Sides per list item. Nope, no idea what it does. Where can we find it somewhere? Cast to animation info in, I think we're basically here in an animation callback. Oh, set active, it must be related. Okay, oh, the amount of sides on the active indicator that it should roll as it traverses each list item, calibrated to create a nice, realistic rolling motion. Oh, okay. That's pretty good, actually. Actually wrote a good comment. Part of why I think the code is so poorly commented is that I am not reading the comments. So that's not helpful. I will read comments on other people's code, which I will get to very shortly. Where am I now? I kind of just want to look at the animation info class. That was nice. Okay, animation info and animation update. Maybe we'll look at those and how they were used, and then we'll move on. So a container for the most primitive data necessary to drive our animation with functions to yield the next tier. Tier seems like an odd word there, of calculated data for the animation. Okay, so we've got num sides is the number of sides for the active indicator, e.g. 6 is a hexagon. Wonderful comment. Wonderful comment, especially this last part. Without this, I would have wondered, is that what I meant? Or is this like how much it should roll? Okay, new index, index toward which the active indicator is heading, index from which the active indicator is leaving, and this is animation info. Okay, so I guess I think animation info was basically saying this is the whole state of the animation, and then animation update was every tick of the animation. I think that's what's going on. Okay, here we go. And I said something about with functions to yield the next something. So where are these functions? I don't see any functions. Maybe I just meant these little getters. I think I meant those little getters. And here, percent of a full rotation an active indicator should see for each of its sides. Oh yeah, okay. So here we're just calculating kind of how much should you turn as you're moving so that you look like you're a wheel actually rolling and not like, you know, the tire on a car stuck in the snow or something where it's rolling, its rotation and its movement are disconnected. All right, so then animation update. Let's see if my theory holds here. Container for the state of a rolling navbar's animation, useful for syncing visual effects elsewhere in your app with navbar animation progress. Oh, that's right. That was how this color, is this a screenshot? Where are the GIFs? That was how the color up top could be synced. That's what I was demoing here. And also when it rolls here, this lerps. The idea of this was the animation update is emitted by this whole package, and anything else in your app can kind of plug in and listen and follow along. So this whole kind of distracting part of the demo is basically supposed to just say the rest of your app can stay in sync with the bottom nav bar. Kind of cool. All right, so that comment at least now tells us what it was, and my theory was totally wrong. Now maybe let's look at rolling now. So here we have another. Oh, right, these classes were at the top of the file. That's why I'm a little disoriented here. Let's look at some of this animation code, and then we'll move on to someone else's code. So here I have a rolling active indicator, or roll active indicator. So this is a verb. So I'm guessing this is going to happen in like an on tap or something. Yeah, so set active. We can see here a new index is coming in and a little guard statement. And then we kick off the animation and, oh, right, it's based on the different types. I could really use like a nice, enums have a nice map syntax that either they didn't have then or I wasn't aware of it. But, you know, that would be a lot nicer for this to make sure I don't forget an animation type. But so roll corresponds to roll, and then there's snap active indicator, spin out in active indicator. Okay. So we've got a different method setting up completely custom animation controller logic depending on which animation type it is. So let's look at how this works. Nary a comment in sight. woe is the miserable schmuck that has to decipher these hieroglyphics. What a terrible curse I have cast upon myself. Anyway. So we make an animation controller, kind of standard stuff here. Honestly, I'd be interested in attempting to rewrite this package with the new Flutter Animate package from G. Skinner, which there's just an incredible talk on from Flutter Forward, and you've got to watch it if you haven't yet. I suspect that a lot of this code would be like shrunk down to one line with that package, which is just a marvelous achievement. Okay, so anyway, we've got an animation controller, then we decorate it with a curve. Got to be able to decorate your animations with a curve, otherwise, what are you doing? And then, standard begin at 0, end at 1, animate all the way across. One thing that I do a lot in my animation code, and I'm curious to hear if any of you do the same thing, is, and it kind of looks a little different here. Actually, this isn't what I was thinking, but I'll often be like, have I gone 50% of the way yet? And then I'll have certain logic. And then there's some other thing that needs to happen on the other side. And then from 50 to 100, I'll do kind of the second half of the animation. And I'm really not sure there's probably a smarter way to do that. Oh no, look at this, an empty set state. Definitely an anti-pattern here. And this is fine, it works. It's not like a bug or anything, but what this obscures is which of these variables that I set up top here actually are relevant for the set state. I mean, we have to think extremely hard about which of these variables were just like helpers and what actually matters. Indicator rotation, does that matter? Does indicator X matter? Does indicator color matter? Some subset of them does, but we don't know which ones. And I would always recommend assigning them in set state so that later on you can know what things that you were doing here actually update the UI. And it's clear because they are assigned in set state. Just a little readability thing that I obviously picked up after working on this package. All right, and then, here was where we were. Yeah, this is where we emit that animation update thing. So you can pass in an on-animate kind of callback that gets kind of spewed the latest info every time the animation ticks. And then this is where that would actually get emitted. Anyway, I actually don't think we really need to look at this too much more. We can get on to other people's stuff, but this is some very old code that has a couple issues, not least of which poor readability. But it kind of does a cool thing, and I think it's a neat package. So there it is. Before I move on to other stuff, I am going to look at chat and see if there are any things here. Oh, Randall's saying the same thing. This stuff all got so much easier with Flutter Animate. Yes, it did. And, gone could be the days of really writing anything like this ever. Because this is not the most fun Flutter code to write, let me tell you. Not at all, which is why I think they made that package. All right. Kamija says, now we know you'll be doing tonight after work. Yeah, adding comments. Right. Updating this package, it is sorely out of date. And can you explain the complexity of such example in terms of hardware efficiency and how we can optimize our program? So the complexity of what example? Like this code? In terms of hardware efficiency and how we can optimize our program? Well, in terms of hardware, this isn't going to tax anything at all. This is like just getting out of bed for Flutter and the hardware on any modern phone. So feel free to restate that question, because I'm pretty sure I'm not understanding what you're saying, but I would like to. All right, I'm going to scan some of the rest of the chat. Let's see here. Tween says, is it good to create a long init state or create a tear off function for event listeners? That's a really wonderful question. And part of why it's so wonderful is that they're kind of obviously the same, right? So it's a style question. And I think if you're just setting variables like this, there's probably not a ton of value in moving those out to another method. But once you start to get into really complicated stuff, well, actually, even this really wasn't very complicated, was it? I mean, could this code have been moved here? Yeah, absolutely. Could this code have been moved here? Yeah, absolutely. But I think as pieces of logic get more complicated, moving them into their own method, just giving it a good method name starts to be like your first piece of documentation. Let's go back down to these animation controllers. And just imagine, you're like, what does this do? We kind of know because we looked at it a little bit, or maybe you guys don't even. I feel like I kind of know because I wrote it 2 years ago and now I'm looking at it. But wouldn't this be way easier to understand if all of this, this code here, what if this was a method that said like rotate and move active indicator? And then it's all the exact same code, but it's somewhere else. And so technically, yeah, it's the same thing, right? It's the same. But when someone just wants to understand roll active indicator, suddenly it's 50 lines shorter. And when they're trying to understand this animate call, they look at the add listener and they just see that it was passed some method that says, rotate and move active indicator. And they're like, great, I can compartmentalize all of that noise. That function does what it says on the tin, and I can get back to thinking about what else is going on in the method that we're in right now. So yeah, I think often moving things to another method is great for readability. Sometimes it can be kind of pointless, like when I did it right here. This was really, I don't know if this improved readability. And because this says initialize, I bet I don't call it anywhere else. Yep. No, this one, I would say this doesn't pass the smell test, but there are great times to do that. It's a good question. Arbad says, can we import the package for a specific platform, not for all platforms? If you're talking about this platform, I don't have that set up. In general, the way to do that is with federated plugins. So if you wanted to do that, what I would recommend you do is make your own package in your app, Google Flutter federated plugins or Dart federated plugins, and it's not that great. It's not that hard, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. And have your own federated plugin in your app, and in just the platform where you want to use all of this code, load in this package and use this. And that's how you would do that. I don't know if you actually meant all of this code that we're looking at. Tween says, make your method names such that they self-document the function. Yep. That's why it's one of the hardest decisions, what to name a variable or function. Absolutely. The better your function name or your variable name is, people kind of laugh at like long, clunky names, but man, they tell you what they're doing. What's your stance on code comments for self-documentation? Well, I think we've seen a couple times here where I had a thing that, like this line here we were talking about earlier. I think when I wrote this, I thought it was self-documenting. And now I don't know what it meant. So whenever in doubt, I think extra comments to document are great. I mean, maybe this is actually just not a sufficient variable name, but it's pretty long. What are we going to add? Like 3 more words to it? Okay, that'd be a little much. So yeah, I think self-documentation can be enough, but often just actual comments are really valuable as well. All right, let's move on to someone else's. I wanted to start with my own so that my first, maybe do this differently next time, statements would be about myself. So I am trying to find the tab where I've saved more things. Oh, here we go. All right. Ben Hills was the first person to respond that he would be in the stream. Ben, are you here? If you are about to have your stuff talked about, as we agreed upon, or as we agreed on Twitter. Okay, popping back over. So Ben Hills said, I'd love to hear your thoughts on my code. Great way to learn and improve. Ben, I agree. And Ben confirmed that he would be watching the stream. So I feel like it is ethical to look at this code. All right. Anytime podcast player. Aha! Ben is here. Welcome to the chat. Stay a while and listen. It's an old Diablo reference. Anyone ever played that game? I'm Deckard Cain. Stay a while and listen. All right. So this is the official repository for the Anytime Podcast Player, the simple podcast playing app for Android and iOS built with Dart and Flutter. Great. So the screenshots look really nice. I think we've got some pretty darn good UI going on here. This absolutely passes the smell test of any podcast app I've ever seen. Podcast apps have a lot of really subtle complexity, as I'm sure Ben will tell us all about. Prefetching podcasts, pre-downloading them, responding to user preferences, like do prefetch for this podcast, don't prefetch for that podcast, saving them on disk, kind of monitoring all that stuff, cell usage. This is there's a lot of stuff around the actual now play the audio file. So I'm sure Ben would tell us all about this. Okay, this is super interesting because Ben has released this app, right? To the Play Store. I think that's what it just said. I think I just read that. But also the code is here for anyone to just download and play. So this is pretty cool. If you'd like to help test it, click on the image below and head over to the thing. You can download the current stable release or sign up for the beta channel. All right. Building from source. Yeah, if you don't already have the Flutter SDK. Oh my gosh, are you giving oh, you're just linking to it. Okay, I thought you were going to replicate installing Flutter. Like, that's a task. Okay, so get cloned, run the thing, do the thing. Search engines. Anytime can search for podcasts via iTunes and Podcast Index. To use Podcast Index, first create an account. This will generate the required key, blah, blah, blah. Okay, interesting. I'm guessing this is for local development. If someone had just get cloned, I would presume that the versions shipped to the Play Store don't need any of this. As I'm saying this more, it's seeming increasingly obvious that that's the case. Open with anytime links. Oh, deep linking. Very nice. That's more complexity that you have solved. This is pretty darn good. Really nice. Okay, built with Flutter Sembast, a NoSQL persistent store. I'm not familiar with this, and I'm excited to dive into that a little bit. RxStart. Yep, very good. Audio service provides background support for audio libraries. Great. And podcast search, which we just saw above. Oh my goodness, this is great. Architecture, Ben, your documentation is running laps around mine. Running laps, I say. All right, so UI, block, services, API repository. This seems totally what I would expect. Layered approach. Yep, just saw the layers. Okay, very cool. So we're obviously not going to be able to exhaustively code review this whole thing because there's going to be a lot in here based on the feature set that we just read. Yep. Yeah, this looks like a for real Flutter app. Man, this is pretty wild. I'm excited to look at what we got. Okay. By the way, folks, is the font big enough, or should it be even bigger? Let's go even bigger. And I think I'm going to hide myself, or maybe I'll just make myself smaller because I'm currently covering some of the screen. Here you go. Tiny little Craig. Look at him in the corner. All right, now I'm not covering any of the goods. So let's do this. Okay, so the main method. One of the first interesting things is how somebody handles all of their bootstrap code. And this is actually a pretty short bit of bootstrap code. So yeah, let's look at what we've got here. Certificate authority bytes. Very interesting. Wait, is this used again? It is definitely used again. And it's set up. Interesting. I wonder why line 15 exists and isn't just all on line 26. But anyway, so this is something that we have to pass into the Anytime Podcast app. Okay. So you set the Chrome. This is good. This is a really nice usability thing. Well, no, usability is not really the right word, but it's a nice kind of polish to put on your app. If you're making a Flutter app, put this on your list of things to add. It just kind of sets where like the cell data and battery, that little bar is, it sets the color correctly. So it looks nice on, on your app, which is also below it often. So you want the correct contrast there. Logging, very good. Very good. Yep. Oh, I wonder what you're using for logging. I wonder if we'll encounter that. We might not unless we look at your pub spec. Okay, set up certificate authority, which was called right here. Okay, so here's some more bootstrap code. Speaking of having long init state or having tear off functions, set up certificate authority is a nice function name. It's also documented further, but let's say I don't care. Set up certificate authority is way easier for me to mentally kind of put in a place and move past than it would have been to have just seen all of this. So I think that's a really clear indicator that tear off functions can be extremely helpful. Let's encrypt. Nice. So one thing I'm just curious about is like, why is this needed? Maybe it's to download the actual files, but I'm actually unsure. Let's read this thing. Maybe this will tell us. Certificate authority expired at the end of September 2021. It did? Android devices running this earlier thing will no longer trust their root certificates, which will cause issues when trying to fetch feeds or images from sites secured with Let's Encrypt. I had no idea that Let's Encrypt called closed up shop. This routine is called to add a new certificate authority. Wait, what is CA? Oh yeah, it is certificate authority to the trusted list at App Start. Wow, that's really exhaustive. I don't know how old this, version 7 is, but I'm guessing it's pretty old. And this is really, honestly, it's pretty impressive. Okay, Anytime Podcast app. Let's look at the rest of it. So back in lib, we've got block, core, entities, nav, repo, services, state, and UI. So Ben here, not going for the kind of feature-based folder declaration, but instead the kind of vertical-based folder structure here. And instead of having, account as a folder, and then in account, there's block, views, whatever else. And then somewhere else, it's feed. And within the feed folder, there's block, views, whatever else. He's sorted his folders in the other direction, which is totally fine. I think a little less common, but no less valid. Let's look at, so block and state are interesting because these are obviously going to be, or they're likely to be related. So I'm going to click on state first. And we've got block state, episode state, persistent state, queued event state. Let's look at what block state says. Share common states such as loading error. Okay, so we've kind of got the 3 state there. Loading error and ready or populated. Rather than having a separate selection of state classes, we create this generic one. Okay, interesting. So block state, block default, block loading, block background loading, successful. So there's a bunch of these. a bunch of these. This is going to be interesting to see how this gets wired into other blocks. I'm actually quite curious about this. Block populated, no input. So there's just, yeah, a bunch of, yeah, just pretty common states here. I can definitely see these appearing over and over again. Let's check another one and see how maybe these get mixed together, if at all. They don't seem mixed together at all, so we'll have to see how that happens in the blocks. So episode state, yeah, update, delete, okay. Actually, I want to go back to block and see, did I miss anything? Oh, here we go. T data. So I'm wondering if these abstract block states are actually going to end up holding whole other block states. I wonder if T is going to end up being something like episode state or persistent state or queue event state. I don't know if queue event state is a thing that gets loaded like that. I'm not sure. Also, Ben, you and I together could write some more doc strings. But your code has been honestly quite easy to follow. Oh, wait, how old is this? I just noticed. Ben, is this code all pre? Not that this makes you a bad developer or anything. Not that you have anything to apologize for if a project that you spent a really long time on hasn't been updated in a minute. But it is pre-null safety. Well, I'm actually pretty sympathetic to that because when you work on a project for a long time, sometimes you just want to call it done and not worry about it anymore. So that's fine. But this is a little older code that we're looking at here. Some things have been updated, in the last few months, last few hours. Oh, nice. But I had kind of missed that. So this is a lot of the logic we're looking at here is stuff that you were thinking, 2 years ago. Okay, back into lib. And now let's look at some of these blocks. What do we got? Search. That one seems interesting. There's a lot going on with search. So, events here. Let's just quickly peek at the events. Very standard. Yep. The type of event that actually has content has it. Some of the other ones are basically just little sentinels. Okay, this seems very good. Let's look at the block itself. Okay, search block, extends block. I'm curious. I want to see if we're going to find, oh, here we go, block state. So this was the generic thing that we looked at earlier. And its type is, I guess this is like podcast. Is this the app that we're in, presumably? And search result. Now, what is search result? I really want to know. So podcast search. Oh no, this comes from a different app. This is not us. Okay, that's fine. But we can see here that block state is used around these other things. That's kind of cool. I like that. Nice way to have, this is the way to avoid dynamic, by the way. If you ever think you need a dynamic variable, you can almost always get rid of that by having something that is uses a generic and then takes the actual type in that generic and stores that variable. Actually, Randall and I were talking about that along with Simon and Vivek and anyone who was a guest or anyone who was tuned in to Hump Day Q&A yesterday. This came up. All right. So init. Okay, so this we've got some more. The generic wrapper here is definitely kind of coming in handy. The first file we opened, it's already offering all of that construction, all of that structure around the loading of this search result, which is kind of cool. Search, let's see, where do you get called? So search is a stream. Interesting. Okay, so when we call search, we just pass out a search event. That's fine. And then where was that underscore search method though? Where do you get called? I mean, it literally gets called right there. Been a snake, it would have bit me. Okay, so in init, we are, what are we highlighted with here? Or sorry, initialized with a podcast service. So where did this event come from? Init, search results, switch map, blah, blah, blah. Oh, this is a callback. I see. Okay. So when a search event arrives, then we actually run the search. Okay. Nice. This is seeming pretty cool. I'm going to look at some comments here and see if I'm missing anything. Let's see. Tuheen points out this is layer-based architecture. Sure is. Yep. I see some folks in the chat also noticing the required call. Yeah, this is pre-null safety code, or as I like to call it, null dangerous. What is Randall saying? All problems in computer science can be solved by another level of indirection. Yes. Yes. With the possible exception of having too many layers of indirection. That's admirable pedantry, Krishan. Yep. Okay. So this is pretty good. I'm going to look at one more block and then maybe a little UI, and then we'll move on to another one. Discovery, podcast. Yeah, so podcast is going to have like playing episodes and whatnot. Let's see how this looks. A handful of blocks. Okay. Audio block, episode block. I don't know what OPML is. I don't think I'm going to get out of this file learning what OPML is. Load OPML file. Oh, maybe I am. Maybe it's kind of audio file. But I don't know, do I? No, I definitely don't. All right. Audio block. Well, that's interesting. Let's look how a block was written to presumably handle the streaming of bytes from a file that was on disk and is now in memory, depending on the size of the file. A block to handle interactions between the audio service and the client. A lot of the code in here could do with moving to the audio player service. Nice. Leaving yourself a to-do. That is good stuff. You never are going to write code that you think is perfect in the first go. So just remind yourself in the future what you intended to improve. Very good. All right. So we've got some stuff set up here. They're all documented. Very good. Oh, look at this. Just a ton of kind of different methods used in the constructor. We can see just how terrible this constructor would look if all the bodies of all of these methods were moved here. Goodness gracious. That would be terrible. Now, when you talk about moving some of these things to the service, this I think could be valuable to kind of hang on for a minute, and then maybe we'll move to the next thing here. But like, why? Why did Ben write this? Why could a lot of the code in here do with being moved to the audio player service? Well, that's because of a little thing called testability. In my day, we used to actually test our code, and we did that by having services that set up dependency injection, and we'd mock them, and that's how we would test our code. I don't know why I said that like that. But yeah, if you have the more code you put in a service, if you inject that service into a block, you can actually test it. So we can see here, it is being injected in. And I think as Ben was writing it, he was realizing, yeah, why is some of this code here? It obviously should be in the audio player service where it'll be way more testable, especially if it interacts with the system and the stuff kind of underneath your code. So let's look at some of these methods here. So this one's fine. There's nothing here that you'd move. I mean, you could move this to the audio service, but this method I think is actually quite fine here. It's just calling methods on the audio service. So that's totally good. Handle episode requests. Again, we're just calling a method on our audio service. Very nice. I wonder if that comment is actually just old and the code did get moved, because I'm not really seeing anything obvious here that I would change. All these methods just call stuff on the audio service. Seems great. Down here, pause, resume. Again, still just calling the audio service. Looks good, looks good. Play the specified track now. Again, yeah, this is all play.add. What was underscore play? What are you? Probably a stream. Yeah, you get closed, so you're probably a stream. Play underscore play appears all over the place. Oh, behavior subject. Is this RX Dart? Is that what this is? Behavior subject. I'm gonna look this up. Dart. Yeah, RX Dart. A special stream controller. It captures the latest item that has been added to the controller. Yeah. Honestly, behavior that it would have been nice for streams to just have in the first place. Okay, so that's what's going on here. This is a stream where you always get the last thing as opposed to the first one after you subscribe, which can be less helpful. Okay, anyway, where was I? We were almost to the end of the file, actually. Well, nice. I don't know if that comment actually has just outlived itself of moving code to the service, because it kind of looks like it's all already there, but very nice. I think this is really darn good. This is great engineering. I would endorse, anyone who learns from this will have to like make the null safety translation in their head, but that's not the end of the world. And I would endorse anyone to read this source code as a viable way to build a complicated, full-featured, mature Flutter app. This is really nice. Ben, give yourself a round of applause. You've earned it. Really well done. Really, really nice. Okay, I'm now going to look for another one. Where are you? Come back to me. Twitter tabs. Okay, here's one. Aha, another person. Another brave volunteer has indicated they will be in the chat. So let's check this out. Shreeman, I think you were in Hump Day Q&A yesterday. Shreeman, are you still here? You indicated that you would be. So hopefully you were still awake, depending on what time it is where you live. But this is a blog app using Riverpod. Nice. And Randall here. Yeah, Randall's already noticed. Randall is one of the, all right, Shreeman is here. Amazing. I think I recognize your name from yesterday on Hump Day Q&A. And Randall is very excited about Riverpod. Randall, I may ask you to help me clarify some Riverpod questions. Also, Verticro, I really love the acknowledgement, the celebration of all the great work that Ben did and sharing it all with us. So cool. Ben, that's really awesome. Okay, so Shreeman, let's dive in. Stay a while and listen. All right, we're going with the less is more README approach. A simple Flutter app showing basic CRUD operations with login and sign up functionality using feature-first architecture with Riverpod and AutoRoute. Oh, nice. I have not really used much AutoRoute. I've seen some videos on it and it looks very cool, but I've not used it much myself. So my first question, Shreeman, and you're in the chat, so you can just help us with this, is what is your intention for this? Is this an app that just you use for your blog? Is this something, was the intention that it would be like a WordPress? Just I'm kind of wondering, like, what is the scope of this that'll just kind of provide a nice lens through which we can look at all the code. But let's actually do that. Actually, we'll look at the pub spec first, see what interesting dependencies you're using. Certainly null safe. Great stuff. Okay, auto route. Oh, Dio or Dio, however it's pronounced. Hopefully you weren't too kept awake by all of the drama around that package this week. And it's maintainer shuffle. All right, Hive. Oh gosh, I love Hive. Really, really wonderful. Okay, yep, a lot of Riverpod. Actually, no, just Riverpod. Sorry, these all say Flutter. Other stuff. Display mode, form builder, native splash. All right, cool. Okay, seems pretty good. Oh, responsive framework. I don't know what this is. Be interested to learn more about that. Okay. Dev dependencies. Are you using any code generation? Build runner, so maybe. And Hive, which we already saw earlier. All right, let's dive into it. Okay, Shreeman has answered the call for info and says it's for beginners to know about auto route in Riverpod. Oh, so this is just a learning resource. Very, very cool. Very cool. Also, I'm a contributor for Dio. Okay, how does it pronounce? Is it Dio or Dio? Like Deeoh or Dioh? I don't know how it should be said. But anyway, yeah, Shreeman is a contributor. So for smart retry, try Dio or Dio X. Dio? I can't figure it out. I guess Dio? Okay. Uh-oh. Randall, assuming it's the other way of rhyming with Rio. So Randall thought it was Dio, but I think Shreeman is saying it's Dio. Or actually, I would read this as Dio, but I don't think that's what he meant. So Dio, I guess, is what it is. And it appears to not rhyme with the famous Brazilian city. Okay. Lib, let's take a peek at this learning resource. So I haven't looked at any code yet. I've only read the very short, and again, this is fine. You know, a learning resource freely given away is what it is. The README, I think, would be a great place for a beginner to begin learning and kind of orienting themselves. So let's see how this looks. First place we're going to start, same as last time, in the main folder or file, sorry. Okay, so we have immediately, we're diving into run app. And ensure initialized is after run app. I don't think I've seen this before. And I believe I'm now realizing this is an assumption that I have not deeply interrogated, but I believe that it is best to put this above run app. Anyone who has deeply interrogated this, Randall or others, please feel free to say something about this. But I think the convention, well, I know the convention, and I think it's potentially important to put this above run app. As I'm thinking about it more, it feels quite important. If your first frame does anything, like I said, well, the thing is, I guess I don't know if this first frame gets flushed to the screen before it immediately moves on. So that would be a big question. But in general, I think the ensure initialized goes above run app, because if your first frame uses something with this at the system level, then it could bump into this not being initialized yet. It hasn't been ensured. Okay, Flutter native splash. Okay, that's good. Yeah, using the widgets binding. So again, I think kind of all of this in general. Wait, a run app again? Oh, this is just there's nothing here. This isn't the actual app. This is just a circular. This is just a spinner. I've never seen run app called twice. Is this? This is likely from Andrea and me. This run app twice trick. What? What? I have Randall, how did you come up with this? You have a video on it. Huh. Well, I'm learning, folks. Okay, let me talk to folks about this, unless you've already done that, Randall, like on the engineering team. I want to make sure that we're not going around the block to get next door on this trick. So I'm going to take that as an action item. Okay, provider scope. This is the Riverpod kind of first domino, and a little logger here. Nice. And my app. So let's do it. Lib app might be where that lives. My app. Nice. Okay, so we have more splash screen stuff. See, this is, oh no, this is just removing it. Well, there does seem to be kind of multiple splash screens going on here. I want to go back. See, this is where I think there's got to be a better way, because there's some splash screen stuff going on here. And there's this, which is like kind of functionally a splash screen, but it's not actually a splash screen. It just looks the same to the user, but in kind of like lower level concepts, it would be, these are just widgets, whereas, you know, this is potentially an actual splash screen. I'm not familiar with this package, but that's what it suggests. Interesting. I want to know more about that. Okay, so app router. We're immediately, so consumer state, this is a stateful widget of the Riverpod variety. That's what this consumer stateful widget means. And we're paying attention to auto route provider, which looks like some more Riverpod. Well, I don't know if auto router has like a provider mechanism, but I'm guessing this is more Riverpod stuff around auto route. And using the new router API, which is, coming down here, passed in. This is where auto route talks to the new router API and these two parameters. And title, app blog, theme data, looking nice. Builder. Okay, so this is interesting because there's a router and a builder. Have I seen that? What is this doing? Oh, the responsive wrapper, which was a package that I hadn't seen. So I'm going to look at that real quick. Pubspec.yaml. I want to understand what was it called? Responsive framework does. So block. Why did I type block? I meant to type pub. Mercifully, Google knew what I meant. Yeah, Shreeman here is saying using responsive framework, which I'm just going to spend a second learning about for everyone because I don't know what it does. Randall says it's completely replaced, but reused, similar to a top level widget being rebuilt. This is all documented. Oh, well, okay, never mind then. Nice. If it's documented as doable, then it's definitely fine. I'm outing myself as not having read that documentation. Okay, so this is a nice GIF showing us how this works. Oh, nice. Yeah, okay. All right. What does the API look like to do this? So supporting all the things is tricky. Sure is. Traditional bootstrap approach, building responsive UI is time-consuming, frustrating, and repetitive. Furthermore, getting everything pixel perfect is nearly impossible, and simple edits take hours. I agree. Okay, here we go. So the builder here. So we've got some min and max width and different breakpoints. But where does it actually like inform the child about how this should work? Because we just have the child here kind of straight away. Oh, interesting. I'm actually still not quite sure how this builder is influencing the child. Does anyone else know this? You can check the example above. Example above. Oh, like these demos, you mean? Well, I can imagine how it looks. Oh, view code. Well, I want to see under the hood. All right, I'm actually just going to put a breather in this because learning auto scale is tangential to the original code review question. But this is an open question for me, just because this sample, maybe I'm missing something, but I am not seeing how the child, the builder ends here. So this is our this is the builder parameter. I'm not seeing how, if this child is like 1,000 by 1,000. So the demo does answer this question. But I think I'm going to need to see the source code of, okay, so now I'll do this. Right. The fact that it works really nicely, that I was, this is what I was imagining, just how it works. I'm not picturing based on the sample. But I will learn this later. Yeah, responsive wrapper. What do you do, responsive wrapper? How are you so magical? Might say in all this text, which would take a long time to read. Someone says, wouldn't I recommend using Flutter Adaptive Scaffold instead of this? I wouldn't, because I'm not an expert at either. But it sounds like you might. And that is, I've heard very good things about Flutter Adaptive Scaffold. I haven't personally used it. But I think it sounds like you are recommending it. All right, someone says, it looks like it uses media query for all the code, which creates a big penalty when resizing the window. That's kind of a little bit of a misconception, that it creates a big penalty. Because if you're resizing the window, your old layout is invalidated. There's just no way around it. You would never want your app to be, for the UI to like stay the same. I mean, maybe in theory you could want this, but that would be very contrived. And in actual apps that users would want to use, I don't think anyone wants the UI of something to stay fixed as the entire aspect ratio or size of the window change. So Flutter is on the hook to re-render everything when the window changes. I mean, there's just kind of no way around that. And when you talk to the media query or use a layout builder or all those things, that's basically just the formal, that's how you like formally register yourself as some of the UI that isn't going to still be valid when the surrounding constraints change. Like, there's no magic way. It's not like, forget the fact that this is using Flutter. Let's imagine that this website was using the DOM. Actually, I'll switch back to GitHub. As I move the window around, like things, okay, this one actually is a really terrible example. Let's go to Twitter. As we move the window around, things are going to change. And this is just not logic that can happen like magically. So if this was written in Flutter, you might say like, oh no, the window is changing and that's a big problem. And like, it's true that it's going to rebuild on every pixel. That is true. So if the user just kind of sits there and does this with your app, it might be a little slower than it could kind of otherwise be. But really, people just kind of quickly resize to the new size they want. And in practice, like that's what's going to happen. And Flutter has to relay everything out. So I think using the media query and layout builder and whatnot, it kind of feels like it's going to be really expensive, but I think it's work that more or less simply has to be done. That's my thinking on that. All right, back to the app. Enough of a responsiveness detour. So lib and main. No, we already looked at main. We're looking at app, and that's where we saw the responsiveness stuff. So first thing on this code sample, Shreeman, is definitely, if it's intended for beginners to learn from, some comments would be great. Because you can see kind of how quickly I'm just getting lost in like different detours and wondering, oh, what does this do? And kind of struggling to figure it out. Not that you have to comment how responsive wrapper.builder works, but Yeah, just a good thing to keep in mind. You could be really verbose on comments here, and I think that would just help people who set out to learn from this code. Okay, so I want to get into the actual app itself. So where I want to see, I guess it's going to come from auto route. That's what's going to determine which views get loaded. So let's look at the router, and yeah, let's look at login. That's a great one because that is presumably what's going to show in the beginning. So also this auto route definition is pretty nice. Definitely code generation being used here. That's the auto part of the auto route. And so login view is the page that, and it even there it says initial is true. So we're going to look at login view. I think that'll be what we peek at. So back to lib features, I guess, and login. There we go. Nice. So we've got a controller, presentation, and a state. So in presentation, we're probably going to see the login view, which might be in widgets. Oh, no, it isn't. Man, it's just here. I was assuming this was a barrel file. It's the real thing. Okay. So our login view is a stateless widget. And it has, the first thing that we see is this big ol', we could get some super parameters here while we're talking about updating code. Login listener takes a previous state and the new state, and this is a Riverpod object and a build context. Okay, this is a pattern that I am unfamiliar with. Let's see how this works. Oh, interesting. Okay, so this consumer widget, this is more Riverpod stuff. So scaffold, safe area, totally standard, consumer. This is just hooking everything into Riverpod. Ref is the magic Riverpod object that can go figure out what the state is, register listeners, all that kind of stuff. This is registering a listener. So we get the login state, and then the ref is going to listen to login state, and this passes in a provider. I'm not sure what this does. And then we obviously get a callback of previous and next. And in here, we are basically calling this big listener. So now we can go back and kind of peek at what this does. So it gets previous and next. So if next is logged in, so this means this makes sense. The user did log in, a fake delay. So I'm guessing that there is no actual login system here, which is fine for obviously for a kind of decorative learning exercise app. But we're going to fake that we were logging in, talking to the server, and then we actually log in by replacing everything with the home router. Okay. So ref.read, this just goes and gets the auto route provider. So this is basically, Riverpod was once describing itself as a dependency injection framework. This is a way for the widget here that we're in the login view to go get a dependency that it has, which is the routing mechanism. So it can move on to the home page after the user logs in. Okay, else if previous is login invalid credentials. So if you didn't log in, if previous was, so if you failed to log in a second ago, and now you're back to the initial state, so you've kind of like cleared it, or it's being cleared or something, we basically just say, hey, you didn't log in, very good. I'm a little confused here about how previous would be invalid and next is initial, and that's when we show invalid email or password. So this like just kind of doesn't seem like what I would have expected. So again, a great thing to clear up with comments for sure. Randall loves him some fake delays. Let's see. Tween says, just convert the stateless widget to a stateful one to get the build context on the state object of the stateful widget. Huh? Just convert? Is this in response to something else? Is this answering a question? Seems like the layout builder is the parent of everything they had written a second before. just convert the stateless widget to a stateful one to get the build context on the state object of the stateful widget. Yeah, Janine, I guess maybe I've lost which thing you were saying that about. Also, now I'm floating. Allow myself to sync myself. All right. Then if we got a login error, we show that there's an error. Very good. And if there's no internet, oh, nice. That's a great one to check for. Then we just show, hey, you ain't got no internet. Bruh, how you gonna log in? You got no internet. Riddle me that. All right, so then, oh, this looks nice here. Oh, okay. So login state has a map method. That makes sense because the creator of Riverpod is also the creator of Freezed, which is the easiest way to get a juicy map method in my mind. So it makes sense that these would be used together. Login state.map. So these are the different forms that the login state can hold, and they're all being kind of ferried out to an individual appropriate view. And I would like to look at this map method because I think it's just wonderful. And I am an evangelist for it. Login state, let's find out. UI state, login initial. Nope. This is interesting that this is in the UI state. Oh, these might be what was returned. I think it was UI. There we go. Logged in error. So these UI state files, they are what was returned here based on the state. So it's like UI dependent on the state. Okay. Map method is in the state folder, Shreeman says. Thank you. Back. Oh, here we go. Oh, I forgot. Okay, yeah, I forgot that I had clicked into that. I totally forgot we were in presentation entirely. Now all of this makes sense. Thank you. Completely forgot about that. Okay, state. Login states. All right. So, oh, this is interesting. This is actually not using Freezed. Where does this map method come from? Did you write it yourself? You wrote it yourself. Interesting. Okay. Shreeman, I am very interested in hearing your thoughts on Freezed and how this pattern could work. This is definitely not what I was expecting. Obviously, this works. The downside of this is merely that you're on the hook. If you add a new one, forget no internet required or no internet error. What if there's like low battery error or something, right? You are now on the hook to remember to add it here and not let it just kind of fall off the bottom. I guess this assertion error would help, but it's possible for the first person that sees this to be a user. It is technically possible. But so I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that. Yeah, patterns are going to really streamline a lot of this stuff, Randall says. And that's correct. Shreeman earlier also said no union plugin is there in VS Code. So I know there is some nice code generation. There are some nice code generation plugins in VS Code. I think that's what you're saying. Yeah, there's a plugin to generate the union class in VS Code. Okay. Well, the only thing there is that you are still on the hook to remember to run the plugin, but that does at least really streamline this a lot. Oop, I accidentally clicked that. But now we'll read it. Nolbert says, yes, waiting for switch and tuples in Dart 3. Yeah, indeed. Okay. All right, so this is still generated code. It's using the VS Code extension, which I think is a very cool kind of bridge to code generation if you're tired of waiting for build runner to run, because it's pretty slow. And anyway, so that all makes sense now. All right, now let's look at this controller. I think this will kind of this is where the providers are. Okay, so login providers, auto dispose, blah blah blah. This is just like bookkeeping that Riverpod allows. Now, one of the things that's interesting about this pattern in Riverpod, a lot of folks see this and they're like, this is a global variable. But Remy describes this as basically just a global function, like a function in the global namespace, which of course there's always countless of in any of our apps. But I think people get a little spooked because it doesn't really look like that. You know, I mean, I think it is a class. Randall, I don't know if you have anything, or anyone else who has really studied this kind of Riverpod stuff, how having this doesn't constitute having a global variable. One thing I think I might have Remy join me at some point in the future, and pretty excited about that. We're going to talk about things just like this. So it'll be a classic, let's not guess, let's find out. But anyway, so here we're setting up the provider. And if you, let's say you're watching this or listening and you think, I only know block, I don't know what you're talking about. Providers in Riverpod are the closest analogs to blocks in Flutterblock. So this is kind of the thing that has methods that you call to update your state. And the block analogy there again would be kind of submitting events to the stream. In Riverpod, you just call a method, same kind of thing. If you were converting from one to the other, you would basically copy all your code out of that block method and paste it. There's like a handler in your block when that event propagates through. You'd copy all that code and you just put it in the method that you call on Riverpod. So pretty similar there. And then just some init stuff we're doing here. So this is how also different providers can potentially kind of link to each other. So providers can kind of build on each other. They can watch each other, and changes can propagate through kind of your network of providers by linking them in this way. So nice. Now let's see what else we have in the Notifier folder. I think after this, we'll call it. It's been pretty good. Login state notifier. So this is where the magic is really happening. So this login state notifier, I didn't even read what the class was, but I'm pretty sure if we go back, we'll see, state notifier provider of login state notifier. There we go. And login state. Okay. So there is some extra magic going on here with the, this class is from Riverpod itself and auto dispose, and then it just takes your things as types, is interesting. But we do return login state notifier here. So these certainly have to match. But then the class, all the actual goods are in the file itself, in the login state notifier, which is over here. So we've got good services here that can be injected in. Very good. This is the way. You already mentioned in the comments that you're going to add some, or mentioned in the chat that you were going to add some comments, and I think that's great. Definitely kind of explain a little bit about the good patterns that you're using here. Anytime there's a global key, here's a new rule. This is my personal philosophy on Flutter. If you write a global key and you don't include a doc string about what this global key does, your app shouldn't compile. That sounds harsh, I know. This is just for the form right below it. But global keys are so often just really like unusual things when you need a global key, other than for form, actually. If there was one exception to what I just said, it would be this. But man, if you're using a global key, almost always a very good idea to carefully explain what on earth you're talking about. Okay, so login. So this is a method that the UI could call, right? So this is going to be synonymous again. Like if you know Riverpod already, then you already know this. If you're coming from block, I want to help you understand what we're seeing here. So in block, you would add like a login event, and then that would propagate through, and then you'd have a listener that would be associated with that login event, and it would basically run all of this same code. So in this, we're checking the forms, validation, and immediately going out to the login repository. This is so good. When people talk about state management being hard, I think what they're almost always confused by is why are there state management classes so complicated? Why is there so much going on? And the answer is almost always that you have too much information, too much processing, too much logic in your state management. You need, my husky just walked away. I don't know if you could all hear his paws hitting the floor. A lot of your stuff in your state management actually needs to be moved into a repository and something in your data layer, some service. And then your state management classes will become way simpler, way easier to reason about. If all this login code was in here, this would be a nightmare. And we'd be like, Riverpod isn't delivering good state management to us. And it wouldn't be Riverpod's fault. So really nice here, really good to have these kind of extra layers underneath. Anyway, we're moving on. We're catching some other connections here. So login is the only method on this service, or on this notifier, which I guess makes sense. Because sign up, I don't know if you all saw it, but sign up is a separate page itself. So it's not like there's even those two functions would be next to each other. Sign up is a different page, different notifiers, different everything. But yeah, no, this looks good. If we get the result back, kind of check if it's an error. Otherwise, it's actually a person, I'm guessing. So we get the token. Oh, and then we set the state. Yeah, this is always the magic thing in Riverpod. You just set the state. It's a big old setter in there, lots of code, and it triggers set state and tells widgets to update and all that kind of stuff. This would be the equivalent of emit in block. All right. Well. Oh, okay. I think we have an answer to our question earlier. Eli says, do not be frightened by the global aspect of providers. I need to be able to see this. Providers are fully immutable. Declaring a provider is no different from declaring a function, and providers are testable and maintainable. Yeah, I think when people talk about global variables, at least what I remember from my operating systems class, is that they're stored in different places in memory, and it can slow down performance in that way. There's also, readability, whatnot, concerns for sure. And the immutability, if you have a bunch of global variables, you can never be sure what code is, is changing those global variables, and their value can be different, like from 1 second to the next, and you basically just can't trust them. So there's kind of like a code complexity and a bugginess aspect of them. And them being fully immutable, as stated in the answer here, is, addresses that concern completely. Where they sit in memory and the cost of accessing them at runtime, I think is not, it is different. And maybe it's just fine. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe devices are just powerful enough now that it's like, you're losing a trillionth of a second, and get over yourself. I don't know. But those are kind of the two concerns of global variables, is the confusion that they can create and the performance cost at runtime. But thank you, Eli, for talking about for addressing the confusion and the complexity and the bugginess that global variables can often lead to. All right. I'm floating again. Get out of here. Well, team, I think I'm going to call it here. We've been at this for a while. Saw some really, really high quality stuff, honestly. A great podcast app from Ben, right? And Shreeman has this another kind of learning opportunity, a resource for beginners about a blog. And I didn't run either of them, but I'm hopeful that they actually do run if anyone were to pull them down and want to be able to play with what they were learning from. But these were really, really nice examples of well-architected code. They had great, one use block, one use Riverpod. That was not scripted. That was just a nice kind of happy accident. And, I'm happy that we saw both of those again. But yeah, no, this was really great. Let me know, by the way, hit me up on Twitter or just say something in the comments. I don't know do we want more of this? Is this good? So please make your voices known. Maybe I'll have a poll on Twitter or something where people can, could be Jasks. Will there be another such episode of Observable Flutter? You and me both are wondering that. Inquiring minds want to know. If folks liked it, then I thought it was great. I think it's a really fun way to learn. I learned a bunch of things as I encountered stuff that I had no idea about, and people in the chat were helpful. So yeah, it is a great question. I would absolutely do this again if people liked it. Aman says we need more like this. Okay, great. Well, I would be very happy to do it. That would be, I mean, I had a wonderful time. So I will do this again if there is demand for it. But folks, for now, that'll be it for this episode. I hope to be here again next week, like usual. So until then, stay safe, everybody.